23rd, 2020, and this meeting is held via teleconference. As chairman of the Budget Review Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing access to the public by means of telephone, with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099. The meeting ID is 828-8336-4287. And the passcode is 524907. The public may also view the meeting via channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through the public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at www.nashuanh.gov and publicly noticed at the City Hall and the Nashua Public Library. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via the phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. We'll start the meeting by a roll call attendance. With the clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here. I can hear everyone.
Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien is present. I can hear the proceedings and I am alone. Alderman at Large, Laurie Wilshire.
I am here, I am alone, and I can hear everyone.
Alderman Ernest Jetty. Alderman Jan Schmidt.
I am present and alone in the room.
Alderman at Large, Ben Clemens.
I am here. I can hear everyone, and I'm by myself.
And Alderman Richard Dowd.
Yes, I can hear everyone. I am here alone practicing social distancing.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, you have 6 members present.
Excellent. Okay. The first item of business is public comment. Is there anyone from the members of the public that would like to present information on anything being addressed by the agenda of this meeting? I'm not seeing or hearing anyone. So we'll move on. Communications.
From John Griffin, Chief Financial Officer, Comptroller, regarding Nashua Fire Rescue, IAFF, Local 789, Unit Collective Bargaining Agreement, Contract Costing. Excuse me. Also from Dorothy Clark, Deputy Corporation Counsel, regarding R-20-088, correction to proposed collective bargaining agreement between the city and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 789. Also from Dorothy Clark, Deputy Corporation Counsel, regarding R-20-088, summary of cost item changes in the proposed fire collective bargaining agreement.
If there are no objections, I will accept the communications and place them on file. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-20-086, relative to the acceptance of donated services in the amount of approximately $140,369 for the purpose of providing cellular phone services for law enforcement purposes.
I just see that real quick.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, recommend final passage by roll call.
Okay. The motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Is there someone here to present information on this legislation? No? Deputy Testaverde?
This is the, I don't have the agenda right in front of me. This is the cell phones, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I have Detective Lieutenant Pat Hannon. This was his brainchild. He'll explain it to you. Briefly, I'll just tell you that the chief and I and Deputy Rourke are 100% behind it. It's something we've wanted to do for years, but have been unable to get cell phones in the budget for investigative purposes. So I'm going to mask up and step out of the room and hand it over to Lieutenant Pat Hannon.
Here you go, bud. Ninja kids? No. What do you want?
Would everybody please be put on mute except unless you're notified? There we go.
How we doing, everybody?
All right. Yes, if you just give us an overview of why the legislation.
Sure. Back in 2018, our problem-oriented policing unit had an investigation with the Secret Service and with the Postal Inspection Service. Basically, individuals were stealing people's identities, opening Sprint accounts, and then purchasing a bunch of cell phones, having it delivered at area addresses in the city. Our POP unit got involved, able to seize about 26 cell phones, multiple iPads, and things of that nature. We'd reached out to Sprint at the time back in 2018 to see if we could have those devices and use them if able. They said that that was fine with them. So basically they donated the 26 iPhone 10s as well as the other laptops and merchandise. So Officer Rejo, who's the lead investigator on that case, came to me. I was the sergeant detectives at the time and said, hey, do we have any use for free new cell phones? And as you're aware, free stuff is great stuff. So I started looking into it back then. Unfortunately, at the time I reached out to Sprint, it cost $37.99, I believe, a phone line at that time. So too expensive for the budget. So I tabled it, told the guy, Eric Hagan, reach out to me if anything pops up in the future. A couple months back, he reaches out and says that Sprint merged with T-Mobile. When the two entities came together, they developed a program called the Connected Heroes program. So what that is, it's a 10-year commitment that Sprint and T-Mobile is offering. They're offering it to any public, state, local, police, fire, and EMS. The 10-year program provides unlimited talk, text, and data for any smartphones. The only catch is you have to have phones. Once I reminded the salesperson that we have 26 free phones, he was probably a little upset that we weren't getting the phones through him, but he said that those phones absolutely work for this program. There are no hidden fees or costs with it. So essentially it's I know we mentioned $140,000, but it's essentially 26 free lines for the detectives. The important part of it is, investigations have come a long way over the years. We have to reach out to victims, witnesses, suspects. We encourage people to go to their houses, but a lot of people aren't answering their phones. So we need to use our own cell phones to contact them when they're not answering the door. Another thing we've noticed over the last couple of years is Wi-Fi texting only. So when detectives are calling these individuals, they don't have calling capabilities. So if we're trying to get in touch with a victim, domestic violence victims, assault victims, things of that nature, some of them actually can't talk to us on the phone. They can only use text messages. So these phones will allow detectives to have them on the street, keep in close contact with these victims and witnesses, and have that texting capability that we don't now. Certainly we could text from our own personal phones, but then these individuals would have our own personal cell phones, and that's not something that we would want out there. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know the cost item looks big, but it is actually all free, no hidden cost for 10 years. We can do 26 lines. If we don't like it after a year, we cancel all of them. If 5 phones break and we just want 21 now, we use 21. It doesn't matter. We can add or subtract as we see fit. So that's all I got. If there are any questions, I'll certainly take them.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this legislation? Not Alderman Clements?
Thank you. No, it seems like a great program. I was actually victim to a similar scheme, although my person took my information and they took the cell phones to Lynn, Massachusetts. So maybe if they ever catch them, Lynn will get the same program. But in any case, no, I think it's great, and so I hope that you use this, and I'm certainly going to be supportive of it. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderwoman Wilshire,
Yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, that's 6 yeas, 0 nays.
motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
Yes,
Alderman Jettie, I vote yes.
okay. So that's 7-0. Alderman Jettie joined us at 7:10. Okay, Alderman O'Brien.
Also before us this evening is R 20-088, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the mayor and the Board of Fire Commissioners of the City of Nashua, New Hampshire, and Local 789, International Association of Firefighters, from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2023, and authorizing a related transfer. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage, if I may do so.
I think we're just going to have it for discussion, so I think that's fine. Unless Corporation Counsel thinks otherwise.
You never know.
Okay. Who is going to present for the Nashua Fire Rescue? No one?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few remarks I'd like to mention.
Commissioner Burgess?
Thank you. As most of you are aware, a lot of hard work and efforts gone into this negotiation over the last 19 or so months from both sides of the table. Considerable changes have been made since June, when the previous agreement failed to pass. I believe Union President Hooley will speak to some of the finer details regarding this, but there are two quick points I'd like to mention. The first, and this is a huge credit to the union membership, but the wage increases in this agreement before you are at 10% over 4 years. And this is down from 14% in the previous agreement. Second, there's an incentive built in to years 3 and 4 to increase the participation in the city's high deductible health plan. This union is already in the top 5 of the city's 22 unions in terms of high deductible health plan participation. So this incentive will only drive that number higher. The entire board of the Fire Commission has unanimously voted in favor of this agreement. And we're confident in getting the support of this committee tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from Nashua Fire Rescue that? Yes, Mr. Woolley, identify yourself and you can make a presentation.
Yep. Thomas Hooley, President of Nashua Firefighters. I'd like to thank the board, the Budget Committee for their time tonight, and all the aldermen that I've spoken to previously throughout this process. We sat back in July and negotiated this contract in good faith. We had the city represented in the room. We had three consecutive meetings, and we worked diligently to issue the concerns of the previous TA and the cost items in that. We reduced COLAs by 4%. We brought the contract down to a 4-year deal, 10% in COLAs, And like Commissioner Burgess addressed, we recognized the healthcare concerns, the concerns of the mayor, and we met them halfway. And that's part of collective bargaining. And during that time, and once we got out of the negotiations, we felt confident that both sides of the room met in the middle. And we're here tonight to ask this budget committee to pass this contract with full recommendation to go to the final passage tomorrow night. The HSA language, we're the first union in this city to lead the charge in that and putting it into our contract. No other union in this city has HSA language in their contract. We were proud of that because we understand the concerns of the taxpayer. Eventually, and that to us is bridging the gap. You know, the mayor asked for healthcare concessions. We answered the call like we do every day on the front lines for this community. We serve this community proudly, professionally. We adhere to adverse times. You know, I was quoted in the union leader of the opioid epidemic. Yes, we stepped up. We answered the call. We're in a pandemic right now, and we're answering the call. Our firefighters are out there every day on the streets, providing a tremendous value to this city. And we just want, at this point in time, after 2 years, to be recognized for the services that we provide. This contract is not costly. We reduced it down, and I've met with all the aldermen, provided informational packets. We reduced the previous TA by almost $500,000 in cost items. We recognized our retention issue, and that's why we appropriated grid box raise. And are all familiar with how we get paid. It's years of service and certification. With that, we recognized all members of our collective bargaining unit with over 10 years of service to the city, serving it proudly, and giving them the appropriate attention. That way we can continue to have the seniority on this job, which is tremendous in our workforce because it's someone we can rely on. Like I said about the HSA, we understand and we already have the most membership participation within the city for city employees. In 2019, healthcare was not on the table. When I became union president, when the negotiations, I read the unaffiliated deal that was given to them for healthcare. And I said, well, can I meet you halfway? Can you not paint our members into a corner and force them out of their HMOs? And we did so proudly, and we recognized health savings account. And we're going to take the lead in our organization and push our members, which every member that goes to that health savings account, we save the city money, a tremendous amount of money. I understand the mayor's concerns now with the pension and the trickle-down effect that you all are well aware, and the representatives in the budget committee that work upstate, and we appreciate all your efforts. 10 years ago, that was also dealt to us. Our costs went up for the employees. We're at 11.9%. We feel your pain and we feel your burden. And after 19 months, since 2019, and almost, we're going on almost 2 years, 19 months without a contract, we feel it's time to pass this contract. We made huge concessions, like I said. The previous contract it was costly. And when I met with all the aldermen, well, most of you, and spoke to you and handed out those packets, it was so you had the information in front of you to see what the deal was. You know, you're looking at a 3.5% in the first year, a 2.5% and 2 twos. The previous contract that has expired, we took a 0 in one of the years. Since I've been on this fire department serving proudly for 17 years and working out of Amherst Street currently at Engine 1, Ladder 1, I can tell you we always put the constituents first. We think about the taxpayer. Since I've been on this job and working for this city, we've always staggered raises, taken zeros. And this time I feel like this contract is fair and equitable for all on both sides. Our negotiation team, like I said, wanted to reduce the cost of this, bridge the gap. with healthcare. And we did that. And I appreciate all your efforts in passing this contract. I'm very hopeful and optimistic that will go through. The last thing we want to do is go back to the table. And after 2 years, our firefighters serving this community the way they do and say, we're going back to the table. I just don't think that's a respectable option at this point. I appreciate your time on this. I understand now with the new pension rates though, with the information that I provided to the alderman, that it shows that the contract cost is going up and the mayor is going to touch on that. But like I said, that pension issue was dealt to the employee as well. And we did everything we could. The previous TA, with reducing the cost and bringing that down, we recognized that. And it's now less money than the previous one. I mean, we're looking at a $500,000 to $600,000 difference from the previous TA that was before the Board of Aldermen. And to me, that says a lot. We serve the city proudly. We represent our families every day when we negotiate this as well, because at the end of the day, this is our livelihood. I appreciate your time this evening. I'm going to continue to advocate for my membership. And tomorrow night, when I address the full Board of Aldermen. And I hope, again, I'm very optimistic. I hope it's going to get full support out of them and out of all of you this evening. Like I said, the numbers are there, the facts are there. And it's just concerning every time we're up for a contract that there's always funding issues. And I just think after almost 2 years, and this is the second round at this deal, that we recognize that, and we recognize the concessions that our firefighters have made, and we appreciate what they do every day for our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from Nashua Fire Rescue that would like to speak? And I see the chief waving his hand. Chief Rhodes.
Good evening. And thank you all for this opportunity to speak with you. Tom was spot on. The previous TA came before the board and the board said, no, too costly. Maybe go work on these things. And to Tom's credit, when he came in as union president, he embraced that and said, okay, how do we get to yes? And he worked hard. He worked hard with financial services. He worked hard with his members. He worked hard with the administration and the fire commission. I've been a proud member of this organization for over 3 decades. There has never been a good time for Nashua Fire Rescue. I'll say that again. There's never been a good time for Nashua Fire Rescue. But the members of Nashua Fire Rescue continue to step up day in and day out. Now, administrations change, priorities change. None of us have a crystal ball, but we do have a memory. The healthcare concession. Some on the board may remember, some may not. We've spoke about this before. Firefighters were asked to make concessions in one of the last contracts. They did. I was a member of Local 789 at that time. We had to come out with money out of our pockets after the deal was made. Yet they let other unions in the city use accrued sick time. Firefighters in our city have not, will not, do not have the option of working remote. They don't. They're stepping up to the challenges every day. They stepped up to the challenge of the opioid crisis. They stepped up when we started to enhance skills and protocols with EMS, when we started carrying glucometers, so we can start diagnosing quicker once we get on scene for people with diabetic emergencies. We started with the administration of, help me, Tom, what am I thinking about?
Narcan?
No, well, Narcan.
Chief, we stepped up tremendously with protocols. Our working conditions have changed. And what I mean by protocols means about our emergency service care. The chief is right. We provide now Narcan when opioid hit. We never carried that before. Narcan, yes, you can buy it at the store and give it to someone that's overdosed. But if you're not properly trained, the adverse effects are vomiting, et cetera. And right there is a risk to our firefighters. So we took that very seriously, and through the New Hampshire, through the protocol system, through the emergency medical director at the hospitals that our licenses are, we were trained on that. And then we were trained on epinephrine for allergic reactions. So we now draw that in a vial, which is also a risk to our firefighters. We have live sticks now. And we carry that medicine, but we carry that because our community needs us. And then we carry aspirin. I know you think that's a simple thing, but you got to know what you're doing because it's a protocol for chest pain, cardiac arrest. So you got to look at that, at everything without working without a contract and implementing these changes because we're answering the call for the community constantly, the community's needs. We touched on the last contract, and there was a driving force of safe stations. Safe stations, we answered the call because we opened our doors to combat the opioid epidemic because we were struggling in the streets with continuous overdoses daily, hourly. So we said, how do we combat this? So we opened up the doors to the firehouses. We're constantly changing the way we do our job. COVID-19, our firefighters came to work every day during this pandemic, putting their families' lives at risk as well because of exposure issues. We had Google Docs coming out every day on the safety and how to tackle this challenge. And you got to look at where it's just an ever evolving job now. We have highly educated firefighters on this job. We have lieutenants with master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, firefighters constantly trying to get more education because the fire service has changed. And when you're putting this highly educated professional organization on the streets, we're just asking, can we get a contract? Can we get a cost of living adjustment? Can we provide for our families? And, like the chief is touching on, all the changes that we've done within our organization. We're still going to building fires. We're still answering box alarms, and we're still answering the service calls. But we do that. We're not here asking for a pay raise because of our job, because of what we provide for the community. We're just asking for the respect and dignity that any employee deserves. And this was collective bargaining at its finest. We met in the middle of the table, and this was negotiated in good faith and with city representatives in the room and the mayor's office in the room. This administration, this Board of Fire Commission, we had 3 meetings and we wanted to get this contract completed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I apologize for the brain cramp on the epinephrine, but I guess my point I'm trying to make here is all of these things these new initiatives and protocols and such that the firefighters have undertaken, they equate to positive outcomes to our community and our citizens. We received the American Heart Association Gold Award for care of cardiac patients for the 5th year in a row. We've had 2 of the last 3 fires we saved family pets out of both of them. Thank goodness we didn't have to go in for humans, and people may say, oh, okay, it's a pet. Well, family pets are a multi-million, if not billion-dollar industry in the United States of America. So if we can keep our taxpayers happy, I think that's a good thing. So I'm going to leave it at that at this point. I mean, I cannot speak highly enough for the job that Tom and his team did. And I want to thank Corporation Counsel, Financial Services, the commissioners, because again, as Tom said, this was truly a negotiation. This wasn't the city that got whatever they wanted and the union didn't get whatever they wanted. We kind of met in the middle. So thank you very much.
Anyone else? National Fire Rescue?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to the budget committee tonight. Thank you, Lori Wilshire, for your time that you took with me. It was a pleasure. I appreciate everyone listening because I'm not speaking for Tom. I'm speaking for 165 members. And I do proudly because I'm their voice when it comes to this issue because I represent not only them, but their families. And I want to thank you for your time. I look forward to speaking tomorrow night again on this contract. And like I said, again, we put the citizens first here. We recognized the costly items of the previous contract and we reduced the cost like the Alderman asked. Thank you.
So anyone from the city that would like to speak? Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Well, I, of course, agree with much of what Mr. Hooley, Chief Rhodes have said about the dedication of the firefighters and everything they've done for the city. And they've served the city well during COVID-19. And yes, they've been on the front lines and been exposed, as have a lot of our other groups of employees. I mean, I know the dangers of COVID. I've had it myself from a workplace exposure. And my wife is still suffering permanent damage because of it. So we've all faced that. But the firefighters have done a good job for the city for a long time, and I do appreciate it. But I think what our citizens, and I will talk about a few of the financial challenges we're facing, but what I think our citizens want and what we want is to have a contract for the firefighters that is fair for them and fair for the taxpayers under the hardworking taxpayers of the city under the very trying circumstances that we're facing right now. Our people, our taxpayers, our residents they want a fair contract. They need us to be cautious in terms of the commitment, long-term commitment of contracts and costs which greatly exceed the cost of living, especially in these times with the challenges, again, which I will get to in a moment. And of course, I think everyone, our taxpayers, our residents deserve us and me to be straightforward about what we're committing to. And so I'm going to be straightforward with you now. Now, if the only raises in this contract were the 10% COLAs that have been referred to, then I support it. Again, if all that was there were the 10% raise over 4 years that has been described, I would support it. In fact, we offered more than 10% last December. We offered 11% in COLAs, but that wasn't agreed to. Fine, it's takes two parties to make a contract. 11% was not acceptable. There are raises in this contract that are not included in the COLAs. And when you include those additional raises, we're talking about 15.5% over 4 years. Now, in my opinion, if we approve this contract, we will create an unsustainable budget. We will be raising taxes to a degree way beyond what I think people can afford. And we will probably we'll either face a major tax increase in the future or next year or a service cut. Again, I think the 11% we offered was reasonable. Certainly we'd accept 10. And the firefighters clearly deserve a raise, which the city did offer them. But now we are facing a number of financial challenges, 4 major financial challenges, unprecedented really. First of all, we've got COVID-19, the first pandemic in 100 years. It has already increased city costs. It will do so in ways that we don't even know yet, and will have an impact on city finances and city services. Second, we have the challenge of rising healthcare costs. We saw an increase of $3.3 million last fiscal year and $3 million this fiscal year, 6 million. This is, of course, a benefit to employees. We understand that. But that, when you combine those two, it's about a 20% increase. That alone, that one line item, those two increases I just mentioned, a little over $6 million, that's 3%, is equal to almost 3% on the tax rate. So if we look back over the last 2 years, taxes have gone up 2.6 and 3.9, about 6.5. Nearly half of that, nearly 3% of the 6 is related to healthcare. If we had healthcare at the cost of living, the tax increases for the 2 years would have been about half of what they were. But we have a plan, and you asked us for a plan, and rightly so. You, the Board of Aldermen, and rightly so, because this is a rapidly increasing cost. So we came up with a plan that increases deductibles for drugs to some degree and deductibles in other areas, which now we have implemented across about 4 or 5 groups of employees. You haven't seen them all yet, but you've seen some of them. The Board of Public Works just approved the inclusion of those healthcare changes for the UAW employees today. That will be coming to you at the next meeting. And you've seen other communication workers and others that have agreed to it. Now, if we can get this healthcare reform in all employees, for all employees, it will do 2 things. Number one, it reduces the payroll deduction that employees have to pay. When we put it in force for city hall workers, it reduced their weekly payout for their portion of the healthcare, their 20% portion. It reduced their portion by over 10%, but it also reduces city costs. Now, the trouble with the healthcare agreement in this contract is that it doesn't conform with what the city's looking for, and in fact increases our healthcare costs, not decreases them. It increases healthcare costs over what we're paying now. If this became a model for all employees, we would see healthcare costs escalating even more rapidly than they already have been. And I think it is entirely reasonable that if we are giving a raise of 10 or 11 or 12% over 4 years, that we can, I think, fairly ask for a healthcare concession that other employees are agreeing upon. Because if we want to save the money for employees and for the city and for our residents, we need to have the healthcare system, the healthcare changes for all employees. No exceptions, no exclusions. No exceptions, no exclusions. Now, who wants to be opposing a firefighter's contract? I've supported many firefighters' contracts in the past and have endorsed many firefighters' contracts. And certainly I don't like doing it, but I think that I have a responsibility to the residents, to the hardworking taxpayers of the city, as well as to the firefighters, to come up with a fair contract. Just to return to the facts, there are raises in the contract in addition to the COLAs. The total raise is 15.5% over 4 years. Mr. Chair, you and others, maybe you, I forget exactly who, but when we I've been sort of sounding the alarm, pardon the pun, over some of the increases that have occurred already. I expressed reservations about one of the police contracts, which was 11%, the last supervisor's contract, 11% over 4 years, 2.75% on average a year. At that time, we talked about the need for uniformity. Now, it was a little more than I thought we could afford because of this health care problem. This was pre-COVID, pre the pensions and everything else. But I said at the time, I thought it was a little too much. I did veto a civilian contract in the police department, which you overrode. But when it came to the police sergeants, okay, 11%. And we talked about uniformity at the time. So that's how we got to the 11% that we offered the firefighters last December. Uniformity, police sergeants got 11%, and that's what we offered the firefighters, and that's still on the table. Now, what are these financial challenges in addition to the healthcare? We now know that our pension costs are going up by $4.4 million next year. That is a huge hit. Number two, we learned in the last week or so that our school aid is likely to go down about $6 million. That's been announced recently, and the Department of Education has sent out the figures. That is a $10 million hit from the state of New Hampshire. 4.4 plus the 6, about $10 million. That is a 5% tax increase before we get to the budget. A 5% tax rate increase before we get to the budget, our own budget. So I think under those circumstances, where we're looking at what, an 8-9% tax increase next year, we really need to be careful, and we cannot, in my opinion, approve for any group of employees a 15.5% raise with a healthcare provision that causes city costs to go up, not down. So as hard as it is, and I wish we could reach a fair agreement, an agreement with the firefighters. I think 10% COLA, 11%, no problem. But I think under the circumstances, 15.5 is too much and is more than we can afford. So, and that our taxpayers can pay. So with all due respect, Mr. Chair, to our firefighters, who, yes, have done a good job for the city, and I know will continue to do so regardless of what happens here, because they are professionals and have demonstrated that many times. So, Mr. Chair, I think I've made my thinking clear, and I hope that you will consider the fairness to both our residents and taxpayers and fairness to our firefighters.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 1 second for what the mayor stated about the 15.5%?
Yes, go ahead.
He's taken a number, and it's not 15.5% for all employees or all firefighters in that contract. There's a retention issue that we're addressing with anyone with 10 years of service or more, and it's a certified level to even achieve that. That means they have to get educated and get certified on our pay grid. So not everyone is going to get a 15.5%, and that we recognized and we understood about the cost items in this contract. So he has taken that number and he's not being given all the facts on it. That's not in the entire contract for all employees. It's a small amount. So I just want you guys to understand that.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's an average. It's the average. So some employees will get more, some will get less, but the average payroll will go up 15.5%. And I talked to John Griffin. He costed the contract, as did Ms. Kleiner. I mean, there are things in there besides COLAs.
Mr. Griffin, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with the mayor that if you look at the 2 lines on the costing, which includes the in-grades, as the union president indicated, and the COLAs, the summation of those amounts equal that amount that the mayor referenced. So at the end of the day, the amounts are paid out as part of the contract. If approved.
When you're talking that upper level percentage, are you talking about if they reach all the goals that they set for the high deductible?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO. The contract that contemplates an attainment of certain percentages towards the HSA subscription, that particular contract is $191,000 more than the one that doesn't have the attainment. The 191,000 is compared to the expected savings in the costing, which is roughly 83,000. So that would be a $97,000 increase if the board chose to approve the contract with that incentive in place.
Okay. All right. Do any of the aldermen have questions on the contract? Oh, Chief Rhodes, do you want to say something first?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Rhodes, Fire Chief, Nashville Fire Rescue. The reality of this 15.8 number, that's a worst case scenario. That means every member is going to take every certification, is going to do every type of training to get to that number. And I can guarantee you that will not be the case. That's not the case today. It has never been the case. But if we're trying to figure out a budget, we have to go worst case scenario. Again, I'll go back to the other deal was a little too rich for the board. Understand it. I am a taxpayer as well. I understand this. But they listened. They worked through what the board, what the full board of aldermen asked them to do. And I think this is fair, and I think my people absolutely deserve it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the chief and I'm supposed to say that. I'm saying it because I believe it, because I've been employed by the city, as I said, for a long time. And I think going forward, you know what the costs are going to be for this contract. What about all the other contracts that have already been passed and all the adjustments that need to be made to those contracts? This one here is a given. So again, I thank all of you. I appreciate your time, and I hope we can have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Members of the committee, questions? Anyone? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very, I find this to be a very difficult issue to get a full understanding of. I mean, the differences between the numbers that we've been given by President Hooley and the numbers that we've been given by CFO Griffin are, vary considerably. And I don't know how we get to an understanding of, who's right and who's wrong. President Hooley talks about a 10% overall increase. And that's, I look at the proposal, the proposed contract, and I see under Article 13 salaries, an increase in fiscal year 20 of 3.5, 21, 2.5, 22, 2.0, 23, 2.0. That adds up to 10%. Divided by 4, it's 2.5% per year, which seems like a reasonable number to me. But when I look at Article 13 for fiscal year 22, it says 2.0, but then it says that there's a possible 0.5% increase to that. And then it talks about adjustments to different steps. And it talks about, 25, not 30, 30 plus. And it talks about could be an overall increase of another 1%. I don't know if President Hooley could help explain, what to me, a layperson who, what does that all mean? I mean, is it 2.0% or is it 2.5 plus 1 that would make it 3.5? And how do you answer CFO Griffin's numbers? I'm making an assumption, but I'm not sure if you've seen them. But how do you explain the difference with the numbers that he came up with as opposed to what you're telling us? If I could, Mr. Chairman, through you.
Yes, Mr. Hooley?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alderman. The 0.5% you see in 23 is the HSA incentive we negotiate. And so we have a certain number of participation, which is the highest level in the city for our fire department across the board for our employees. And it was to entice members to switch to the HSA. And we were gonna, with 0.5% if we reach 70% HSA participation. We wanted to incentivize it because we all know throughout the city, the health savings account is where we need to go to save money in healthcare. To drive that home to my membership, we negotiated a 0.5% raise if we reach 70% participation. We then negotiated in the final year another 0.5% if we hit 75% participation. I worked with Rose, and the contract analysis breakdowns were done by her in assisting us. I appreciate all her efforts. She's a wonderful person, and she took a great deal of time with us because she cares too, and she wants to see this contract move forward. Like I said, we broke that down, and all the numbers that I provided for you were done by her, not by with us in the room to explain what we negotiated. So when you add that, if we don't reach the 70%, then no one gets a 0.5% raise that year. If we don't hit the 75, no one gets that. And then the other, anything else you see in there, like that we've been addressing this evening with the grid raises, and like the chief said, that's worst case scenario, and everyone needs to be certified and have a level of years of service. And we only recognize in this contract because of is 10 years and plus. Because again, if you talk to the fire chief, we're losing firefighters constantly to other cities and communities. And we're trying to adhere to a retention issue. So we're like, if you stay longer, you'll get paid more. And not only that, but we're trying to address the way we negotiate too moving forward. That way these pay grid increases, so the next time we negotiate, we're not worried about COLAs. Because as a matter of fact, if you look back over the years, we haven't had a true COLA in the last 10 years if you average it out in the national average. And in that last contract, I said we took a 0 in one of the years. And I can tell you right now, it was an 8.5 over 4 in the last one, but when healthcare for the employee costs went up, and then we lost almost 2% of our salary. And if you go to the HMO, when we talked about the HMO, we did the average of the HMO changes, the mayor and was touching on about the unaffiliated and the UAWs. That's a 3.8% reduction in salary for the employee. So we're just trying to bridge the gap, and we recognize the concerns here with healthcare and driving home to go to health savings account. And not only that, but we're the first union to put that language in their contract. And like the chief touched on, the last time healthcare was an issue, we retroactively paid back the city. We were the first ones that had to adhere to that. And then other bargaining unions within the city were able to use accrued sick time. So, and again, when 2019, when President McAllister was in my position, and I have his notes, healthcare was not on the table. So this, we were almost 2 years out, and now healthcare is. And then the mayor talked about COVID-19 and the finances and everything else. And we understand all that. And that's why I said we reduced costs from the previous TA by a significant amount of money. And I gave out the packets. We broke all that down. All the information I gave you was worked on with Rose from City Financials.
Thank you.
Okay. Could I follow up?
Good question, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, could I follow up?
Mhm.
The last time we talked about the contract, I can't remember when that was. I heard somebody say June. During that time, I asked, I had looked at collective bargaining agreements for other fire departments. And, I said at the time, it appeared to me that our national firefighters were, being paid better than other departments in the state and even in Massachusetts. I admitted that I had done quick research. I didn't pretend to have done an exhaustive study, but I encouraged the fire commission and the commissioners and the union to when they came back, to come back with information about that. When you talk about providing incentives for the higher ranking members of the department, if we're already paying more than other departments, is it really necessary for us? I mean, I understand COLAs, I understand keeping up with inflation, but the rate of inflation has been 2% or under. In other departments, their increase in COLAs has been around the 2% number. And so, when I look at the 10% over 4 years, 2.5% seems reasonable to me. But I wonder why, do you have any answer to my question about, how we're paying our firefighters compared to other departments? I think I mentioned that Manchester has a much larger department, has more fire stations, but their budget is well below ours. Do you have an answer to that?
The only thing excuse me, President Hooley of Local 789, the only thing I can say to you, Ernest, is if you go through those contracts that you're comparing to, they have these implemented approach. Their salaries are more than what's stated. There's other incentives. There's other things. They look at what they provide for the community. Like when you look at Portsmouth, they recognize education incentives. So if you have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, you get more money. So when you look at the contract and the salaries in there and what they're getting for raises, and you say, oh, we pay more than them. Well, comb through that and you'll see other incentives, like I said, for education. We don't recognize education on this fire department in our contract. We recognize tuition to a degree, but we don't recognize when a lieutenant has a master's degree or a firefighter has a bachelor's degree. We don't get money for that. So when you go through the other departments, and I understand, I think you did a great job of looking them up, but you got to comb through it. Like, again, I'll recognize Portsmouth. They're paramedic level. They run ambulances. They get their paramedic license paid for plus an incentive once they get it completed. And that's what a lot of departments do. And I know you're looking at Manchester, but if you go through there and you look at their most senior firefighters, their base salaries have other things built into them. So it's just the way they pay their firefighters in the other communities. And again, I don't like comparing because I work for the city of Nashua and I know our value and what we do for our community and our citizens. So thank you.
I would just add that having been in many negotiations when I was on the Board of Ed, it's very difficult to compare cities in New Hampshire because the contracts are all different. They get paid differently. Even ours get paid differently. Like the education, the teachers contract, they get more money for if they have a master's or a doctorate's degree. So you have to look at every aspect of the contract, and it's not as easy as you think to do. So just want to state that. Anything else, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, could I just ask CFO Griffin to explain how he came up his numbers? Why are his numbers different than President Hooley's and Rose? I can't remember her last name, but I assume he's talking about someone that works for you, CFO Griffin.
Certainly.
Griffin?
I'd be happy, Mr. Chairman. As Chief Rhodes said, the way we cost this out is the maximum possible payout. We don't guess at who's going to be certified, when they're going to be certified, et cetera. So working with my colleague Rose Evans, we did a couple of things. One is we figured out what the union and the fire commission wanted to do with the 20, not 25, 25, not 30, and the addition of the 30. We costed that out, and that's shown on the second line under the base salaries. That's called in-grade increases. That number has gone up from the last time you saw the contract in June. So that number has gone up without the HSA incentive by $243,000. The COLA has been reduced by $500,000. So the net effect of this contract, the affordability of the contract, is $250,000 less than the one you saw in June. I'm not sure what Mr. Hooley gave out to you. I could definitely take a look at it, but we're costing the costing that I'm in charge of, financial services is in charge of the costing, working very closely with admin services on the medical and my understanding of the New Hampshire retirement system's employer cost. The interesting part of this, Alderman Jettie, is you've received two costings. One with the incentive, which adds 0.5% in years 3, fiscal 23, and I mean fiscal 22, and then the other 5% in fiscal 24, the fourth year. That's the 0.5% that you're looking at. So it's essentially 0.5% year 3 and 1% year 4 because it's embedded in the COLA. That value is $191,000 more with the incentive than without the incentive. The savings, the projected, one final point on the savings don't equal the additional cost. So from a financial perspective, I wouldn't recommend the trying to attain a percentage to give everybody else a 0.5% increase. That's my financial perspective on that. So again, in summary, I haven't seen what's been handed out, but I'm very confident and comfortable with the costings that my division is required to provide to the Board of Aldermen. Thank you.
Okay. All set, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else with questions?
Yes,
Alderman Lou?
thank you. As a new member of the Board of Aldermen, I just wonder if someone can clarify for me that the Budget Committee is being asked to approve an agreement between the mayor and the Board of Fire Commissioners, but it doesn't seem to be an agreement. So if I could just get some clarification on, was this not really agreed upon? Because at times we've been told, we're told many times that this was an agreement with, oh gee, I can't think of the term, but is this an agreement that has been made between the two parties or not?
So all city contracts have a place for the mayor to sign them after they go through the Board of Aldermen. If they're approved by the Board of Aldermen, the mayor can take various actions. He can approve it and sign it. He can veto it, or he can approve it just by not signing it. If it goes, I think it's 10 days, I could be wrong, but and it would, if the Board of Aldermen had approved it and he doesn't sign it and takes no action against it, it's approved. So those are the three actions, but every one of the collective bargaining agreements has a signature line for the mayor at the end of it.
Mr. Chair, can I give a brief response on this just to?
Certainly, Mayor, since it's your signature.
This is actually an agreement, Alderwoman Lou, between the Fire Commission. They're an independent board, elected board pursuant to the Nashua City Charter. So it's essentially an agreement, a proposed agreement, which the fire union and the fire commission have agreed to. And they are asking the mayor and the Board of Aldermen and the mayor to some extent to also agree with and approve this is a financial commitment for the city.
All set, Alderman Lou?
Oh,
Can I add to that, Alderman Dowd? That was a tentative agreement with the city. And that's what's before you now.
Correct.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. And so one of the stated parties is actually representing the city. It's either the Board of Fire Commissioners or the local.
Well, in the negotiations, as I understand it, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, you have the union, you have the fire commissioners who sit down and talk, and I believe Attorney Clark represented the city in those negotiations.
I think she represents the Fire Commission, if you ask her.
She's nodding her head, so I'm going to assume that's a yes. Yeah, we sometimes get into convoluted relationships with our attorneys and different boards. Long story. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to also go out on a limb and say, representing the Fire Commission, Attorney Clark, you made sure that everything was legal as far as the contract was concerned.
Yes. My role was assisting the Board of Fire Commissioners in the negotiations. They're the employer board for this group of employees. And so, you know, what's interesting, the city is actually at different times represented by different entities. And so in this case, they, as the employer board for these employees, they're sort of the first step of negotiating with the union to get a tentative agreement. And then once that's ratified by both the union and the Board of Fire Commissioners, it comes to the mayor and Board of Aldermen to approve the cost items, which is the step it's at now.
Yes. Good point, though. I just want to point out that in these contracts that we're approving, we can only take action on any cost item, not anything else. But the other thing I want to point out is, like, when we deal with the Board of Education, they have their own attorney that does their negotiations, and that attorney, can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he represents the Board of Education, and our corporation counsel represents the city in those types of negotiations. So it's a little different on some of these labor boards. So you all said, Alderman Lou, or?
Well, just one clarification. Thank you. Because several times it's been stated that the bargaining was done in good faith. And I just want some clarification, because that seems to keep being repeated. And I guess I would feel like it's important if we're just here to approve a contract that was made by two legitimate entities, representatives of the city. So, but the description of this says if it's a negotiating in good faith, it says that it's between the mayor and the Board of Fire Commissioners. So did in fact the mayor and the Board of Commissioners, Fire Commissioners, arrive at this agreement? And as I said, I'm new to this.
Yeah, they may, in this instance, there is a little disagreement between, and I'll let him speak for himself in a minute, the mayor and the fire commission. The fire commission is established by city charter. They oversee the fire department, and that includes the budget. So when they are approving a contract, they're taking their budget into account as well. We, as a Board of Aldermen, get to approve any cost items and ultimately the budget. So what they're asking us is to approve the contract that was negotiated between the fire commissioners and the National Fire Rescue. So, and if we have specific questions about any of the cost items, that's what we're here for tonight. And everyone votes either in favor or not in favor of the contract the way it is currently presented. We can't make changes to it.
Well, I guess what concerns me is that the mayor, it says that that this is an agreement and that the mayor is a party to the agreement, and yet he doesn't seem to agree.
Well, as I mentioned before, if the Board of Aldermen agrees to the contract, the mayor has 3 courses of action.
Okay.
You all set on that, Jim, or do you want?
I mean, I don't know what Alderwoman Lou is looking at, but this is an agreement between, a tentative agreement, as Mr. Hooley said, between the Fire Commission and the Fire NFR, the local. And the Board of Aldermen, it goes to the Board of Aldermen in the first step. They have to approve the cost items. I have a role in it in the sense that, as the chair said, I could take several actions. But I haven't entered, I mean, ultimately, I think what is meant there is that if this is all approved in the end, there is an agreement between the city, if you, the Board of Aldermen, ultimately approve this thing after all the steps, that there is an agreement between this, then the city, not just the Fire Commission, then the city, after approval by the Board of Aldermen at the final stage, there's an agreement between the city and the local. And I, as the administrative head of the city, sign contracts. So I suppose at that point, there would be a contract, if it was finally approved by the Board of Aldermen, that I would have to sign. But that doesn't mean, but I've told you my opinion now, I mean, as to what I think and the reasons for it.
Okay. Is there any other, you all said, Alderman Lynn?
Is that clear?
I just want to say thank you. That Mayor Dodges, that helps clarify. Thank you. As I said, it was a thought, and I'm new to the process, but thank you. I thought that you had agreed initially to this contract. No, I'm all set.
All right. Any other alderman, board member or not, budget committee or member or not, anyone have any questions? I'm not seeing any.
Well, Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
nobody else is, because you had one slice at the apple, if nobody else wants to speak, you can go ahead, Alderman Jettie.
Okay, that previous discussion just reminded me of a conversation. I'm not sure if I had it, if it was just me and the mayor talking, or if it was the mayor talking to a larger group. But I kind of recall his saying that that he had formed a group to help in these union negotiations, which included Director Kleiner and some other people from the administration to help present the city administration's point of view in these union negotiations, and that the fire commissioners, if I remember correctly, he said that the fire commission would not accept the participation of that group. If I could ask him to clarify that.
That's,
Yeah, so
I'll let him clarify, but it's a little outside the scope of what we're dealing with tonight, because that was an effort to put together how the city's going to negotiate future contracts. In fact, I was asked to sit on that. We had one meeting and then COVID hit. Mayor?
So recall that we've been discussing how various contracts affect city finances for some time. And a year or so ago, we were talking about healthcare costs, and there were two police contracts, one civilian, one supervisors. And at that time, and previous to that as well, I and some members of the Board of Aldermen had been talking about the need for uniformity, that we couldn't have these contracts all over the place. One contract is 15, one's 8, healthcare benefits all different. So there should be some level of uniformity. So Ms. Kleiner, leading administrative services, has met with various departments at various times, telling them what at least the administration believes the city can afford, and what, how the health plan works, what changes we're seeking, that kind of thing. And she can detail all that, but she's met with various departments in several meetings. And because she and John Griffin are most informed regarding how this health plan works, how these contracts affect the city budget, because they're part of the budget team, I asked the Fire Commission to include Ms. Kleiner in the negotiations. And I think, they declined to accept that proposal. I suppose that's their right as an independent board, but I think it would have, I think not including her, or in the alternative, Mr. Griffin, is one of the reasons we're here. The healthcare plan, as you've heard Mr. Griffin explain, that the Fire Commission and the union came up with, independent and without the input of the people who know about what we're trying to achieve, it's going to cost $191,000 more. The point here is to reduce costs, not increase them. But the plan that's incorporated in this contract, this so-called incentive raises, we've never done that for any of the other unions that have agreed to this. We've given certainly raises. Again, the UAW contract that's going to come to you there, it's a 10% raise over 4 years. Something you and I agree is a fair raise, and they've agreed to the health plan we have proposed. Ms. Kleiner was very engaged and involved in those negotiations. So I think it would help to have someone who understands what the city is seeking part of all these negotiations. We've had people, who know how to cost the contract involved, but not, but there was no one who really could, but the people who are part of the budget team were declined.
Yeah, so I'd prefer not to go back in history on things that didn't happen or why they didn't happen. And I certainly don't want to get into what this committee, if it ever meets again, structures it going forward on contracts, because that's not what we're here for tonight. We're here to evaluate the current contract. Is there anyone else Alderman that wants to raise a question or make a comment? If not, I'm going to make a comment. I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to support this contract because I don't want people to get confused when I go through what I'm about to say. The contract that came before us in June had some significant expenses in the first 2 years, which has been reduced by some amount of money that we don't seem to agree on, but somewhere up to maybe $500,000. At the time, I was concerned about, with the pandemic, first of all, in the 2019, how we were going to come up with money that hadn't been budgeted, since it was after when we started discussing it, it was after the budget had been closed. There were probably ways, but I was concerned about that. Plus I was concerned about the current year of infamy, 2021, or the FY 2021 budget, because of COVID and not knowing where we were at. Somewhere after that, we started getting these costs for FY 22. But a lot of the costs that are being driven to the city by the state are not the firemen's fault, and they shouldn't be held responsible for them. The pension plan, I think the state is being very disingenuous with the city. It's a statewide pension plan that they pay nothing for. It's ridiculous. They started at 35% to get the cities to join it, and now they're at 0. So that's an issue. The education costs of $6 million, I think, are not realistic. They're basing it on numbers that are going to change. It's all because of COVID again. And by the time the final calculations are made, I think we'll be back in a more positive light on that. Healthcare costs, again, nothing that the firemen have done drive those healthcare costs. And after January 20th, healthcare costs may come to more realization than they have in the past. Whether they go down or not, we'll see, but we don't know where they're going. But again, the healthcare costs are not driven by the fire department. Now, the changes that came about in what we're trying to do with all the new contracts came about after this negotiation started. And I've been in a lot of contract negotiations, and if you keep changing the ground rules, you never get anywhere. That's not fair to either side. So going forward, I think anything coming before us needs to comply with the city's health plan. And we can get into more of that later. But on this contract, the firemen stepped up and they reduced the cost in those first 2 years. Is the contract more expensive than we really should be looking at in the time frame and all the expenses the city is? Yes. But I don't think that we want to take the actions to fix the FY 22 budget issue on the backs of the firemen. For all the reasons they've stated, they're there on a day-to-day basis. They're out there. They have people that have come down with COVID because they're out with the public on a first line basis, and they're dealing with people. The last contract, they took the hit. They had 1 year of 0. And I only know of one other union that did that, and that didn't work out well for them either. So, you know, when I went back and looked at their past contract, I said, okay, we need to step up to the plate this time and help them become a little more whole. Is it a hit on the budget? Yes. But, you know, we have the funds for the 19 and 20. And you know, they'll have to budget the funds for the 2 years of the contract. And how the city budget in FY22 works out, we don't know. Because there's a lot of unanswered, you know, there's a lot of things that we're saying are going to happen FY22 that if we take some positive action as a city, should not happen, my opinion. And I also think that the city needs to sit down and figure out how negotiations should go. Too often we've waited till the 11th hour when the contract was coming into the Board of Aldermen to make changes because something else changed. You can't do that. You just cannot do that. We have to have a process that says, okay, you know, and I'm not saying these are the things that we'll agree to, but, you know, these are the holidays that the contracts can have, period. This is the health plan for the city, take it or leave it. You know, there's certain things that we as a city need to take a position on, and then the Board of Aldermen has to stick to it. But we can't be all over the place and changing things every time a contract comes down the pike. So again, I'm going to support this. Do I think it's expensive? Yes. But do I think they deserve it? Yes. So that's my 2 cents. Does anybody else want to speak? Alderman Clements, I knew you would speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I too am going to support this contract. You know, the truer words have never been spoken in that it's never a good time for the firefighters. I've been on and off this board since 2008, and I have seen many contracts come before us. When I was first elected, the 789 local had been without a contract for 2 years, and they went on for another year without a contract, even from there. So I've seen these battles before, and the argument from the administration every time is that, you know, it's just not a good time. But it's always a good time somehow for the fire department. It's always, I mean, for the police department, it's always a good time for some other union. But for whatever reason, it's just not a good time for the fire department. And for me, I have never, ever ascribed to that. To me, we have hardworking people who work for this city across many different areas. The fire department is one of them. I supported the contract the last time. I thought it was a fair contract. I'm certainly going to support this one. I think it's high time. I think a year and a half without a contract is way too long. I think it's embarrassing. And quite frankly, you know, this city can and should do better. So I'm urging my colleagues to please support this contract. I have heard from very few taxpayers who say that they do not want this contract to go through. Very few. Most of them want this. They want to support our firefighters. They want this to go through. They know the costs and they want it. And so I'm going to support and I'm going to listen to the taxpayers of this city, and I'm going to support this contract. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Alderman Wiltshire.
Thank you. So I did not support the last go around with the fire department. I thought it was a rich contract. But on this one, I'm going to. They went back. They did what we asked them to do. And I'll agree with Alderman Dowd. You know, one thing comes down the pike, another thing comes down the pike. It can't all fall on the backs of the firefighters. It just can't. I think this is a reasonable contract, and I hope that you will all support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I hear the argument that, that when the board rejected the last contract, and I hear several of you say that the firemen went back, they heard us, and they came back with changes. And when I first looked at it, I thought that was true. When I saw that the the COLAs were, what they asked for the last time was 3.5% per year for 4 years. This time it's 3.5% in the first year, 2.5 in the second, and then 2 in the third and fourth, with which comes out to 10% over the 4 years, an average of 2.5%, which seemed reasonable. And I was encouraged, and I thought that yes, they did listen to us and they did come back. But then I hear that those numbers really don't reflect the actual cost of this contract. That besides these COLA numbers, there are built in to the contract some increases in wages beyond COLA, which the last time the firemen said that they wanted an increase beyond COLA. They wanted to reach parity with the police department, my research, which has still not been rebutted, is that our fire department is being paid better than most of the other fire departments. I think all of the New Hampshire fire departments and a lot of the similar fire departments in Massachusetts. So, if we were starting from a point where our firefighters were being underpaid, then yes, everything I've heard about the firemen and the firefighters and the fire department being top notch and doing a great job, I don't disagree with any of that. But I think we're starting from a point where they are being appropriately paid, and and they deserve cost of living increases to keep up with inflation. But the inflation rate, my research shows is 2% or less. And other departments are increasing their people around the 2% level. So, again, I thought the 2.5% COLA increase was appropriate, but then, when I'm told that that's not the whole story, that there are built-in increases in wages and salaries, especially for our more senior people. So 1% of 50,000 is one number. 1% of 100,000 is twice as much. And the issue of the health. We're being told that they're making a compromise on the health, but the administration is telling us that actually it's going to cost the city more the compromise that they've come up with. And I know you don't want to talk about it, Mr. Chairman, but the fact that the city administration was not, given a place at the table of these negotiations, I agree with the mayor. It was a missed opportunity. So I'm, again, as I said the last time, if my research is wrong and if what I'm saying about our firefighters being paid appropriately is wrong, I'm happy to hear it, and I'm happy to change my mind if that's the case. But from what I know so far, I'm having trouble. I mean, what they asked for last time, was about approximately a 15% increase, and now, according to the administration's numbers, they're asking for 15.5%. So I'm not convinced that they've come back to us with that they heard us, and that they're coming back to us with a more reasonable contract. So I can't support it.
Anyone else that would like to speak? I think I saw Alderman Wilshire again, and then Alderman Clee, and then Alderman Schmidt.
Alderman Jettie, I have a question about what the rest of the contracts look like in the other departments. What do they pay for their health care? And you heard what Mr. Griffin said, that when they put the numbers in here, it was worst case scenario, assuming that every firefighter is going to go for those added trainings and skills, and they're all going to all jump in this year and they're all going to get paid. Worst case scenario is what we were told. And what we heard from Mr. Hooley was that it's nowhere near that number. So I'm not sure that comparing this contract financially on its face is any different, or that we're giving away the store to our firefighters and other towns aren't. I don't buy that at all. What's in their contract?
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Chairman Dowd. And I was going to make some of the comments that Alderman Wilshire, President Wilshire had made as well, that they are the worst case scenarios, and they call them incentives for a reason. It's to get people. Now, while I think that because it doesn't mean a 5% or a 0.5% or a 1% raise, that they will possibly make that 70% and 75% with the HSAs. I'm kind of banking on that probably will happen at I think they set a net cost of $97,000. But when I look at the previous tentative agreement, I see a 17.3%. And when I look at this tentative agreement on the surface, I see a 15.2%. So I do see that they have come down in reduction in some way. And maybe they've built some of that 2% in with the incentives or something to that nature. But I think it is being creative. It is saying to their members, you have to do this. You have to meet these requirements in order to get some of these. And in some respects, that kind of makes us have a better force. And it creates a retention, I think, as President Hooley and Chief Rhodes kind of mentioned. So I think that they have done, some due diligence. I would have liked to see maybe city administrator be at that table, but I don't know what other contracts do if they have someone from the city there. But in any regards, I hope that you will give a favorable recommendation to this. Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully understand and admire the mayor and our CFO for taking good care to assure us that everything that's coming down the pike is understood and arranged for. But in this case, I honestly think that the firemen came to us with a fair contract, past its due, and we simply owe it to the people who care for our city to ensure that they are well paid and understand that we do appreciate them. This is important to us, and it's important to the people I've spoken with. This contract is fair, and we really do need to support it. Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to respond to the one of the previous speakers' comments about comparing Nashua to other cities. The only time, in my opinion, that it's worth comparing Nashua to another city is if another city is doing it better than ours. And I don't particularly like to be compared to cities that aren't paying their employees as much as we are. We should be the top. We should be the best. We should always strive to be that way. And, so the fact that, we're not, or that we're the top in New Hampshire, good. We should be. We should be the top. We get the best down here in Nashua. We have the best fire department in New England. We have the best fire department, I would say, probably on the East Coast. And there's a reason for that. Our insurance premiums are low because of it. So yes, you pay a little bit more in your taxes. These folks get a little bit more money, and we're all the safer for it. So for me, when I compare Nashua to other cities, I look at the other cities and I say, can Nashua be like that because they're doing this better? Not, they're not paying their employees as much as we are, so why don't we try to pare down? To me, that is a false narrative. It's a false choice every single time.
Anyone else? Under that same scenario, looking at other cities' contracts, our police chief's the 5th highest paid police chief in all the cities in New Hampshire. Maybe we ought to be giving him a pay increase. I mean, if that's the logic we're going to use, comparing apples to apples, we have enough problems comparing union to union. I don't think we need to go out of town to start doing that unless you're going to have somebody that's going to put a lot of hours into comparing the actual cost to the cities for this and the coverages that they get for the cost compared to what we get.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chief.
Have you forgotten I'm on this call today?
I know. As soon as I said that about the police chief, I knew you were going to say something.
Okay, just as long
I'm
as
sure
know
you
I'm
fall
here.
in there somewhere too.
Well, the chief of Seabrook makes more than I do, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay, I do have to ask one question from Attorney Clark. Is there any reason that Alderman O'Brien cannot vote on this?
I think, geez, I thought we had already actually discussed that and had a ruling that he shouldn't, but I hadn't researched that issue.
I just want to double check, so.
Alderman Dowd, Mr. Chairman, if I may, at this particular time, I am content. I do not intend to vote on this as the way it is. I feel that the current city charter that has it specifically mentioned, and let me explain to the good people of Nashua why their alderman at large, which duly represents you, the people of Nashua, why I cannot vote. And the reason I cannot vote is because my son works on the fire department. My son is the ripe old age of 36. He's been emancipated since the age of 18. He hasn't lived in my domicile, and I do not depend on any financial security from my children. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, the fact that they are my children, I think they depend upon some of my financial security still. But the thing is, there is no benefit that I would ever receive on voting on this contract. There's not a conflict of interest, other than the fact that my career for 35 years was a firefighter of Nashua. I am content to let that dog lie at this particular time. I will, in the future, work most strongly and to change that, because I feel the citizens of Nashua elected me to vote, and I intend to appease them and do so in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman O'Brien. If there's no one else that has any concerns or questions, I'm going to ask Alderman O'Brien to call a roll other than himself. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
No.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien abstains. Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes. We
Mr.
have,
Chairman, you have 5 yeas, 1 nay, and 1 abstention.
okay. Motion carries. This will be on the agenda for tomorrow evening at the full Board of Aldermen. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I don't think that, let's see, new business ordinances, we have none. Tabled in committee, I don't think there's anything, having talked to the people involved, that we need to take off the table for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Alderman Clemmons?
may I ask just a question of follow-up on the feasibility? I know we're not taking it off the table, but I'm just curious where that's at and why that hasn't moved forward in some time.
I think it's primarily an issue of combination of COVID and Director Cummings having a number of things on his plate at the moment. I think.
Mr. Chair, I do have an answer on that.
Oh,
You're talking about feasibility of Elm Street, right?
right.
We escrowed money for that.
Yes.
So I think, so we escrowed money, so we don't need this money. And I think Economic Director Cummings is, I can report to you on, in the future as to exactly where he is. But the reason we don't need the money is that there's escrow for this.
Right. So I think at the next budget meeting, we'll take it off the table and eliminate it. And we'll be done, and Director Cummings can go off and do his thing with the escrowed money.
Okay, thank you.
All right. General discussion. Anyone? Nope. All right. Public comment. Is there anyone on from the public that wishes to comment? I don't see anyone. Okay. Remarks by Alderman? Yeah. All right. None, and we don't need a non-public. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn by roll call.
Okay, please call the roll.
Alderman Clemmons,
Sorry, yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes, because I think I can on this one. Alderman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries, and the meeting's adjourned at 8:48 PM.
Night, everyone.
Night.